She fed herself from the blood of her victims, men, elves and orcs alike. The last child of Ungoliant herself, Shelob the Great, a foul creature of spider form. Hello friends and foes of Middle-earth, and welcome back. Today we'll go through the full story of Shelob, the dreadful creature from Cirith Ungol. Our story begins with her mother Ungoliant, who will be covered in full detail in a video of her own. She was a spirit who took the form of a monstrous spider, and the Valar perceived that she came from beyond Arda. Melkor made an alliance with her, and together they destroyed the 2 trees of Valinor. Hereafter they fled over the hill Caraxes to Middle-earth. Here disagreement ensued, for Melkor had promised her that she could devour all the gems of the Noldor, but he never intended to give up the Silmarils. Though the Silmarils were locked in a crystal casket, they had begun to burn him, and his hand was clenched in pain, but he would not open it. The Silmarils he named unto himself to possess forever, but Ungoliant rose up against him and enmeshed him in a web of clinging thongs to strangle him. Then Morgoth sent forth a terrible cry that echoed in the mountains, and from the darkness of his fortress came the Balrogs in great speed to his aid. With their whips of flame they smote asunder the webs of Ungoliant, and she quailed and turned to flight, belching black vapours to cover her. She fled south into Beleriand, and dwelled long beneath the mountains south of the Thornian, Cirith Ungol, the mountains of terror. In that dark valley that would be known as Nan Dungortheb, the valley of dreadful death, she met other foul creatures of spider form that had dwelled there since the days of the delving of Angband. There she mated with them and devoured them, and many more foul creatures of her kind were bred there, including Shelob. Eventually, before the rising of the sun, Ungoliant fled into the forgotten south of the world. We don't know exactly what happened to her, but it's believed that she ended long ago, when in her uttermost famine she devoured herself at last. But let us return to her child, Shelob. Like her siblings, she was bred in the valley of Nan Dungortheb, in the mountains of Cirith Ungol. When Beren passed through the valley, it said he fought her kind, and passed through by paths traversed by no other elves or men. And so he came into Doriath, where he met and fell in love with Lúthien. We do not know if he saw or fought Shelob, but it is plausible. We know little of how Shelob came to the Mountains of Shadow, except that she fled from the ruin of Beleriand before its destruction. Then, during the dark years of the Second Age, she came to Mordor and settled in her lair in the Mountains of Shadow. In Sindarin it would be known as Cirith Ungol, the Tunnel of the Spider. But this was before Sauron came to Mordor, and even before the construction of Barad-dûr, around 1000 in the Second Age. She served none but herself, and fed off any living creature she could find, drinking the blood of both elves and men. In that time she grew fat and bloated, and weaved webs of shadow, and her vomit was darkness. Here she would also mate, and her lesser broods, bastards of invisible mates, would spread to other parts of Middle-earth, if they were not eaten by her. From the Mountains of Shadow to the eastern hills, to Dol Guldur, and the fastness of Mirkwood. These were intelligent beings of great size that would spread terror wherever they lived. Most famously the great spiders of Mirkwood and Dol Guldur that we encounter in The Hobbit. Yet none of them could rival Shelob, the last child of Ungoliant, and she was great in her own right. As the power of Sauron grew during the Third Age, the people near the borders of Mordor fled, especially after Minas Ithil was conquered by the Nazgul in 2002 of the Third Age. After that, elves and men no longer came near her lair, and she had to resort to eat orcs, which she considered to be poor food, according to what Gollum tells us. Sauron knew long that she dwelled in her lair, but allowed her to stay, because she was an excellent guard of the pass of Cirith Ungol. He did not mind her eating orcs from time to time, but he had plenty of those to spare. At times he even sent prisoners to her. A report was sent back to him, how she played with her food. For this reason, he called her his cat, though he did not command or control her. So they both lived, delighted in their own devices, and feared no assault, nor wrath, nor any end of their wickedness. Never yet had any fly escaped from Shelob's webs. From the appendices we learn that in 2980 of the Third Age, Gollum is searching for the One Ring near the borders of Mordor. Interestingly enough, this is the same year Frodo's parents drown, in the Brandywine River, which is just further evidence that the popular fan theory about him murdering them is false. But I'll debunk that in a video of its own eventually. Here Gollum came across Shelob, and he bowed to her and worshipped her, promising her to bring food. From Shagrad, the captain of the Orcs of the Tower of Cirith Ungol, we learned that he supposed Gollum was not good to eat for Shelob, and it seemed to him that Gollum had an understanding with the Great Spider, and they seemed to work together. This earned Gollum the nickname Shelob Sneak by the Orcs that knew him well. I think this odd understanding between her and Gollum is interesting, as it clearly demonstrates her intelligence and that she wasn't some foul creature without thought. It could also indicate that Shelob was able to speak. This is further backed up by the fact the offspring speak in The Hobbit when Bilbo and the dwarfs encountered them. While the game's Shadow of War is far from lore accurate, they did actually give a dialogue in the game, but I think there's little evidence that she could actually shapeshift. It's still a great game, despite its low inaccuracies. Sometime in the Third Age, between 3009 and 3017, Gollum enters Mordor again, possibly through Cirith Ungol, and he is captured by the servants of Sauron and brought to the Dark Tower of Barad-dûr. Here he was long tortured by the servants of the Dark Lord, who was eager to learn all that he knew about the ring, its whereabouts, and the hobbit that had taken it from him. When Sauron had learned all that he might from Gollum, he was released in 3017, and the miserable creature made his way back to Cirith Ungol. The Orcs of the Tower of Cirith Ungol had been ordered to let him pass, and Shagrad knew that Gollum had used the stairs of Cirith Ungol once or twice since then. During The Lord of the Rings, Gollum would once again meet her ladyship and bow low before her. On the 11th of March, 3019, Gollum slipped away while Sam and Frodo were resting after they had climbed the stairs of Cirith Ungol, and he visited Shelob again in a dark lair. On the next day, he led Sam and Frodo into the tunnels, unlike in the films where only Frodo enters with Gollum. The tunnel is described like this. Out of it came a stench, not the sickly odour of decay in the meats of Morgul, but a foul reek, as if filth unnameable were piled and hoarded in the dark within. Here Gollum would abandon them in the dark. He planned that Shelob would eat Sam and Frodo, so that he could find the one ring among the bones and clothes, which Shelob usually left behind. He seems to have known her well, but she had no interest in rings, towers, or anything of that sort, only to grow as fat as possible, until the mountains could hold her no longer. But at this point in history, she was hungry, and hungered for fresh meat. There in the dark, they could both smell Shelob, and sense her malice that felt like a sickness on them. Frodo and Sam stumbled around, and had difficulty finding their way out, and Sam knew that it was a trap. Suddenly, in the dark, Sam was reminded of Galadriel's gift to Frodo. Frodo took out the phial of Galadriel and held it aloft. It shone in the dark. That is when in front of them they saw it. Eyes growing visible, two great clusters of many-windowed eyes. Shelob. First they were horror-stricken and wanted to flee, but Frodo gathered his courage, took the phial in his left hand, and drew his sword Sting. The sharp elven blade sparkled in the silver light, but at its edges a blue fire flicked. Then he advanced towards the eyes in the dark, and it wavered and fled before Frodo. Frodo and Sam were able to flee from the tunnel to the outside of the pass of Cirith Ungol. But Shelob caught up with them and stung Frodo in the neck, where his mithril shirt were of no aid. A venomous sting caused a death-like coma that made Sam believe Frodo had died. Normally spiders don't sting, however, but bite. While this is the word Tolkien uses in the book, there is evidence that supports he used it in the rare sense where it refers to a spider's bite. This is something he does in letter 163, where he writes, "And if that has anything to do with me being stung by a tarantula when a small child, people are welcome to the notion." Thus all his references to Shelob stinging may mean biting, but who knows, she was of spider form, not a spider herself. In the films, however, she does actually sting Frodo, but not in the neck. Sam took up the fight with her, but she did not have soft spots like dragons, save her eyes. Her hide was ever thickened from within, with layer on layer of evil growth. The blade scored it with a dreadful gash, but those hideous folds could not be pierced by any strength of men, not though elf or dwarf could forge the steel where the hand of Beren or of Turin wielded. In the end, Sam was victorious though, by letting her impale herself upon Sting when she tried to crush him under her massive body. Never before had she been dealt such a wound, and with the phial of Galadriel in Sam's hand, he blinded her and sent her crawling back into the dreadful lair. Wounded, she would remain there throughout the rest of the Lord of the Rings. Of Shelob's ultimate fate, Tolkien only provides us with this. Shelob was gone, and whether she lay long in her lair, nursing her malice and her misery, and in slow years of darkness healed herself from within, rebuilding her clustered eyes, until with hunger like death, she spun once more her dreadful snares in the glens of the mountains of shadow, this tale does not tell. So who can tell if she died from her wounds, or lived on into the Fourth Age? I like to think she died there in the darkness, but what do you think? It's rumored she will play a role in Season 2 of The Rings of Power. While this might be true, I have a feeling they'll change the story, like they've done with the rest of the lore. Still, it might be interesting to see her, if they make her less like a spider, and more like the foul spider-like creature she actually was. Something truly terrifying and nightmarish. And so ends our tale about Shelob the Great, spawn of Ungoliant. I want to end by thanking all my Patreon supporters and the members here on YouTube, and anyone that have donated since the beginning of the channel. Without your help, this channel wouldn't be possible, so thank you. If you want to know more about Sauron the Second Age, then you should watch this video next. As always, thank you all for watching and being part of the Council of the Rings. Farewell till next time.